Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, what an amazing day, interesting panels, lightning talks, case studies. Um, and today, closing or starting the introduction, I want to talk to you about, or doing a call to action, how we can actually leverage this opportunity, how we can close these gaps that we have identified throughout the presentations, throughout the days, and how we can actually seize the opportunity of advertising as an economic growth engine by fostering data and innovation in a digital Europe. We will look a bit into the past, what happened in the last 10 years in terms of the regulatory environment, the general framing conditions, how the industry has responded. We've seen a lot of details on that in the various panels, but we'll do a quick wrap-up on that. And how the industry has actually built in the last 10 years very significant building blocks for a truly digital European infrastructure, and then look at how we could drive this forward to make it a success. So if we look at the last 10 years, and we've heard about a lot of these topics in the previous panel, we've seen that if you look at a 10-year cycle, you might think of it or not, but GDPR entered into force roughly about 10 years ago, with general applicability starting in May 2018. You might think, well, everything's sorted out and done deal, right? But the reality is we are still discussing the basics here, still discussing validity of consent, still in discussing what is actually personal data, what is pseudonymous data, what is anonymous data, and we're still discussing the weighing of fundamental rights between the right to privacy to consumers and also the rights for businesses to conduct their business and earn money, aka the pay or consent debate. This is driven by new case law streaming in from the European Court of Justice, naturally, even years after years after years with GDPR being in place. And we see significant ruling a couple of times every year, and also with DPAs changing their interpretation of the law, applying the law to new technology, and sometimes aligned, sometimes not. Bad luck for the industry, how to comply with that. In parallel to that, we heard the cookie deprecation thing. Around 2017, platforms started to enact restrictions on data access and restriction on addressing consumers for advertising purposes, most notably or known, obviously, the third-party cookie deprecation, but it's a much broader topic. This actually then led regulators, because data is an essential asset for advertising and the economic growth, to enact new laws like the DMA, but also laws on the national level. And in parallel to that, we've seen additional digital regulations like the Digital Service Act, the Data Governance Act, the Data Act. So it's all a big mess, honestly. The industry has reacted to that very actively, not only by complying with the law, but actually creating building blocks for a truly European digital infrastructure. And we just picked 4 of them, which you might know and you might not know, right? Tony was obviously referring this morning to the IAB Europe's Transparency Consent Framework, a central pillar in digital monetization, and I think a one-of-its-kind project. We'll look a bit more into details in a couple of minutes. The European Net ID Foundation, an initiative by media companies that provides login services and consent management driven by European companies for European users. And UTIC, one of the later entries, a telco-powered initiative that provides consumer addressability service. And obviously, as we've seen, the industry is working on additional things that go way beyond what is regulatory requirement. A big topic, obviously, privacy-enhancing technology. But now we're entering the age of AI, and wow, we already have regulation in place before we've done anything. And we're already seeing here, that's what the dots are for, additional regulation, as we've seen in the discussion, that should fill certain gaps and stuff like that. A picture tells more than 1,000 words, but are we done yet? Another 10 years of regulatory debates, another 10 years of increasing regulations. We can't afford another 10 years, maybe one. So we need to get quicker. We need to be better in collaboration. We need to get this done. The picture tells more than 1,000 words. In reality, the gaps that we have been discussing throughout the day, they are not narrowing, they are growing. We are living in extremely complex times, and the gaps in innovation, in upskilling, in growth are actually getting more complex. So we must avoid a digital ice age by not seizing this opportunity, and we must avoid overregulation. Advertising as a building block or an engine for growth is is largely hindered by antitrust topics when actually, for example, media companies or telco companies are collaborating and it takes them years to set up a new project. Uncertainty of the application of law and also the application of law to new technology like AI, which creates huge uncertainty of the validity or the necessity or the ability to execute business models. Looking at a couple of examples, like I was alluding to, we've heard enough about privacy-enhancing technologies, so I'll skip that. The IAB Europe's Transparency Consent Framework, a project in the making for 8 years, I think, right? Starting in 2017 with GDPR at the horizon. It's a framework to facilitate compliance with data protection and privacy law, namely the privacy regulation, and to improve transparency and control for consumers. There's two major building blocks. One building block is technical standards. Technical standards, how you actually encode consumer choices on the technical level. Technical standards, how on a given app website you can retrieve these choices and how they are transmitted between different data controllers. And also formats and specifications, how data controllers that actually request consent, for example, determine what they are asking for, what data they are processing, for which time frame, etc. The other part of this can't live without policy. So the TCF naturally also contains baseline UI requirements for user choice and information and consent. It contains standardized purposes, illustrative text for consumers, and also things like storage duration, data categories for disclosures, and all the like. I'm not aware of any system globally that does that. As a matter of fact, TCF is an export hit because now it's building the foundation for the global privacy platform with the IAB Tech Lab that is now being deployed in the US, Canada, Brazil, and all across the globe. Another thing that I personally have been involved in the last couple of years before joining Bertelsmann is the European Net ID Foundation. This is an initiative by the biggest media companies in Europe because we felt that naturally first-party data in light of the regulatory challenges and the platform changes, so consumer access and the ability to collect data from consumers is a central asset, and this asset should not be provided by US tech platforms. So we wanted an alternative to sign in with Google, sign in with Apple, and then we said, okay, we have to do it. Antitrust concerns and also neutrality led to the conclusion that this must be an independent foundation without any monetization goals, and this foundation supervises and guarantees the neutrality of the products and tools. NetID is in the market since 2018 in the GSA region currently and is available to more than 35 million consumers in the European digital market. It follows a user-centric approach, right? It's not just about data monetization, but it always has this approach. We need user centricity in terms of login choices with consumers, but we also need centralized privacy controls that can also alleviate some of these cookie pop-ups concerns that consumers have. Another initiative in that direction is UTIC, consumer addressability service that is powered by telco operators that I think started in the market in 2023. Obviously, discussions much earlier, likely 2020-21. It has been established by European telco providers, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, O2, etc., to enable responsible digital marketing, also in light of third-party data and cookie deprecation. It is active now in multiple European countries. Also similar to NetID, has centralized privacy control and a very user-centric focus and also very strong technical privacy guarantees in terms of the use of consumer data and also the consent interactions. Actually, in the GSA market, UTIC and NetID are collaborating because they are sharing so many joint values in terms of how they think the future of digital marketing looks like. With all of that in mind, to actually ignite this growth engine for Digital Europe, we actually need to find a new collaborative approach. We've all been part in these discussions around the cookie pledge, the existing exchange format, and I feel this really doesn't work currently. So we need a new collaborative approach with policymakers that is promoting consumer choice and welfare and ensures access to digital services for consumers, but also enables digital services to monetize and have a well-being. We must unlock Europeans' digital business potential and also ensure our independent pluralistic media landscape in Europe. And this can only be achieved with a new collaboration model with the IAB Europe as a trusted interlocutor, with its members and the companies engaged. And we encourage the policymakers, lawmakers, to actually engage in very active feedback loops. We heard a couple of them are in planning, and we hope this is very successful 2025. And we also encourage policymakers to actually leverage a test, adapt, and learn strategy in tackling complex questions. You can't solve these problems with doing 2 workshops remotely in a 2-hour session. We want to be much more engaged, much more deeply engaged, and at best, actually, and Tony was referring to this morning, really develop a collaborative effort and a collaborative development, solving complex problems by not defining new regulation after new regulation after new regulation, but also heavily investing in solving problems with actionable code of practices. And this is actually something that the digital fitness check actually is suggesting. Not more over-regulation, but actually work on practical problems and solve them with code of practices. And with that, if we implement all of that, we will avoid the digital ice age and we'll live happily ever after. So let's close the gap all together. And with that, thank you for your time and have a good evening.